I have had this thought that the world is so chaotic. I need to stay in a bubble and not deal with any humans, because humans are going to either be stressed out by me, or or they're going to stress me out, or I'm going to say something wrong, or I'm not going to feel valued, or I'm going to feel alone. So these are thoughts that have come into my mind one or a few times in my life because of my interaction with human beings on the earth, right? And so my proposal was just stay away from them, and then everything will be fine. But you know what happens when you stay away from all the humans? You there's a lack of community, and although it feels good to be by yourself and to feel safe, then it might feel good and you feel safe to be by yourself. One day you might wake up and realize, oh, I think I want to be around people. I think I want a community. Today's content is inspired by a content creator I came across on a page called The Remnant Truth. This content creator name is Courtney Ivan, and there's not too much to gather from her IG page, but I did notice that she has a podcast, and the podcast is called Spiritual Wars. And so we'll see a little bit about how she navigates through spiritual wars through the piece that we'll look at today together. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background, so just to give you some insight on why I thought today's content was appropriate for our exercise on shifting our negative thoughts to a positive thought. So the Spirit Wars content, she shares this podcast with someone named Ben Ivan, but it says, many people have a glitch in how they see themselves. When your perception of yourself is distorted, it can lead to living with imposter syndrome and identity issues. The background patterns you run can create a perceived gap between your potential and who you are. These podcast episodes will help you see yourself from a different perspective so you can have real connections and access to yourself and claim the brilliance that you are. What's so beautiful about coming across this video last week and experiencing my life today is I've had 2 conversations so far with people about this idea of fear and faith. And very organic conversations, but I think it fits today's topic because one thing I've noticed is we practice what we know. If we lived in an environment where everything was negative or someone always found the bad in something and we adopted that same belief system, then it's a little bit more difficult to practice something new, especially if you don't know anything new. So here on this channel, when I invite you as my in-friend to go in and beyond the content we consume, it's really about practicing these different perspectives and challenging ourselves to see them, even though it might be difficult at one point. For me, someone who seems to have a domain or a disposition to always look on the good, this is part of my value system, I realized that I also have these moments where it's difficult to transition from a thought that's not helping me to a thought that does support me. So as we go through today's video by Courtney, I'm going to come back and we're going to go through an exercise with my famous T chart. This is something that we seen in our school days. It's not anything new under the sun. It's not anything new under the sun, but it helps me in my world make it very clear of how I can shift from one to the other. It also makes it so that I can identify that there's always another side to the story. One thing that this political season has taught me, because I generally wasn't really involved in politics, but it was really heightened this year in my adulthood, that there's one side that agrees to one core belief, and then there's another side that agrees to one core belief. But in the midst of both sides, there's all these other beliefs. There's all these different aspects of people. But when it comes to picking and choosing a side, we are more encouraged to just choose a side just because, instead of looking at what actually supports us, what actually helps us, what actually brings us forward. We're more advocates of just having the side versus, can we have a conversation and can we get to an understanding together, even if it doesn't align with all of the issues on your side. And so I bring that up to say that even when our thoughts seem like they're true, And it seemed like this is the only thought that we know. We kind of have to have that experience with ourselves when we come to the middle ground and we shift to see, even if I don't believe in positive thinking, even if I don't believe that if I try this today, it's going to make a difference, what are the other perspectives that I can bring to this conversation that would help move any of my thoughts forward? And I think this is most important because when we adopt that there's more power in negative thinking, we don't realize that if there is more power in negative thinking, where is that power leading us? And if we took time to practice what that positive thinking can do for us, and positive thinking might not be the word. It's interesting that when you think positive thoughts or say positivity, that's even been screwed up to say, hey, it's not always happy thoughts. And it may not be. It may not always be happy thoughts, but what we're doing is we're training our brains to see something. Maybe it doesn't have to be happy or positive, but see something that actually powers us through. When I wrote my book, Brown Girl All Caught Up, I used this battery because I realized that a battery, when you put it into your devices or your remote controls, it has both the plus and the negative. So we can think positive and negative. And the thing is, both sides were needed to charge this battery in order for it to be used. So we don't have to completely shift from the understanding that there are negative things that happen, there are bad things that are happening, but we want to also make room and space that the positive charge can also support us. So getting into today's video, I want you to think about these 3 questions, because what Courtney is going to do, she's going to share with us this idea of proposals being similar to these thoughts that come in our heads. And she's going to share how she went through this experience where the proposal started one way and then she went down an entire trail, which some of us can relate to. I want you to listen to the experience with me. And then as you listen, think about these 3 questions. The first question is this: how do you recognize when a thought is a proposal rather than the absolute truth? Again, this is going to be more clear when we're listening to the video together, but jot that down and think about that as we listen. The second is, what evidence do you typically gather to support your thoughts? And is that evidence balanced? And then third, how do your emotions influence whether you accept or reject certain thoughts? So let's go ahead and get into today's video. Get out your pencil, get out your journal, your paper, and let's be quick to listen and slow to anger, knowing that although we are slow to anger if anything triggers us with any of the content that we consume on this channel, we can still recognize that something might bother us or something might be misunderstood, but we want to be slow in receiving that. That's when I think about that saying, being slow, or that scripture, being slow to anger, is giving you an opportunity to really think and give yourself space and to breathe. Because when we make these choices in our lives to be upset or to adopt the negative thought, it's also an opportunity for us to slow down and input some questions. And so you'll see a lot of questions throughout this experience together. But with all that being said, because I've said a lot, let's go ahead and get into the content.
Access us through proposals, and then I'm dealing with that all evening. So I've pulled over and I'm going to explain to you what proposals I'm receiving, and then maybe then you can dialogue within yourself how that's happening and playing out for you. So in real time, while I'm in the car, I'm thinking as I'm driving, this proposal comes to me, and it's not like an entity is sitting on my shoulder like a devil or something and whispering these thoughts to me. This is something that sounds like my inner voice. It sounds like it's something that I've come up with like my thought. That's why it's so easier to believe it. This is how the proposal goes. My friendships and my relationships here in Australia are not as deep as my friendships and relationships in America. I don't like living in Australia as much as I loved living in America, because people in America liked hanging around with me. They appreciated me in different ways that actually I felt honored and encouraged by, and I'm not going to have those experiences here in Australia. That's what the proposal is. Now, so you can see how that comes to me in my own inner voice, and it just pops into my head randomly as I'm driving. Now, again, that dance starts where I start to then go back through my memory. The last few weeks, how many friends have I spoken to? How many people have I caught up with? Courtney, how many people like you here in Australia? How many people appreciate you like they did in America? And as soon as I start to allow those thoughts to continue while I'm driving along and I'm singing in the car or like thinking about all my errands, the floodgate then starts to open and the thoughts start to come in. Now, this is really important because there are emotions that can be attached to those thoughts as well. The emotions are accommodating them. So not only am I thinking these proposals are coming in my voice to me, there are also feelings attached to that and how I feel about that. So I've caught this proposal right here, right now, before I start feeling sad and reminiscing about all my friends and my time in America and why I should go back and building up a case to my husband why we should forget about Australia and move back and all this. I've caught it right here. And this is the important part, if you're listening as well, to catch it in its proposal stage. Because if I continue to cultivate that proposal as my own idea, it then starts to build a structure around it where I build the evidence for why I need to believe this, why it needs to become part of my core beliefs that Australia and the people in Australia are not as relational as the people in America. And you might be thinking right here, right now, I know heaps of Australians. They're amazing. They're so friendly. Or, Courtney, that's crazy. Like, I've got so many friends here in Australia. Yes, I know. But you can see how some evidence that we collect can support a proposal to then becoming true in our mind. Then we start to build a structure around it where we then start to protect that belief. So even if my friends came to me and said, sorry, is this how you're experiencing us? This isn't true. Like, we all love you. We all see you quite often. You're experiencing this quite opposite to what the truth is. If I start to actually grab this proposal, build the structure around it, believe it, I will start defending it. And I will start to tell my friends how they don't show up for me or this or that and bring out all the reasons why. Then that can cause an actual closed loop cycle in which people start to leave the friendships because of what I'm believing. And then you end up acting out what you believe. So what does this even have to do with dark spiritual entities? It has a lot to do with it because this is on a smaller scale. If I start actioning thoughts, proposals that sound like my own and start believing them, building the structure around them and defending them, that forms a stronghold. And then when strongholds are formed in people's minds within their soul, they will then become defensive, and it's hard to break through the stronghold to help them, allow them to see who they are and the brilliance that they are and how they belong in the community and how they're contributing to the community. So you can see how depression and anxiety is skyrocketing through all of our society because these are the type of strongholds that are in and operating in people's minds. And depression is the English word we give for a frequency, for an entity that is operating on that frequency. And as soon as my frequency drops because I'm sad, I'm getting upset, I start believing and protecting that belief that I don't belong here in Australia, that my frequency starts to match that of a depression. And that's how it opens up access for that spiritual entity to now have access to me because that agreement has been formed. So I'm intentional in the proposal stage of not gathering the evidence to try and support that belief so that then takes root in my mind. And then I start acting on it and breaking off friendships and leaving the situation here in Australia. I need to be intentional in combating that because every spiritual battle starts between the ears.
Right. That was good, wasn't it? Definitely aligning with my core beliefs. There's some keywords and phrases, and interesting. Okay. It's so interesting because I realized that my algorithm really does show me what I believe in. And that has to do with a lot of the searches that I do, a lot of what I'm creating in my world. And so I'm not sure if it's just the sophistication of the technology or if it's the sophistication of my thought system that brings in the experiences that I have to cultivate my world and the outcomes from the thought. I don't know what I was going to say. Forget it. But the idea I'm trying to emphasize is this. I was on a plane the other week, real quick. I was on a plane the other week, and we started having this conversation because I just didn't want to be on the plane at that moment, because last time I was on the plane there was turbulence, and I was just like, ah. So I was a little shaken up, but I knew that I wanted this experience to go well. And it was very early in the morning, but what I had invited to myself was someone who was talkative, just as talkative as me, early in the morning, so that we can talk on this plane ride the entire time. And so thankful for that. It was a good plane ride there and a wonderful one back, seamless and all the things. But one thing I'm noticing about that plane ride is the conversation that I had with this person who was a stranger, who really was someone that could have been my friend, as far as how we had these same thought processes. But we went through the conversation, and one thing that stood out to both of us is we could be sitting in our world, not saying anything, not typing, not writing, not searching, just have a thought, and then go onto our phone and then see that thought come and manifest in an ad or through the content on YouTube or Instagram or all these social medias. And when we had that conversation with one another, it was like, oh, that happens to you too? I thought I was alone. I thought I was crazy. But the thing is, it was happening to both of us. And then we started going through these theories of why we think it happened. But what was so important about that engagement was we both had a thought and we kept it to ourselves because we didn't know how to communicate it to other people. Oh, well, up until that time that I just decided to say it. But we didn't know how to communicate it to other people without thinking that maybe this thought is crazy. And so we keep it to ourselves. And so one thing I believe is important about community and practicing these things out loud with one another is sometimes we come across thought and content that is very similar to what we believe. The tricky part is sometimes that belief system that we hear is not serving us, or sometimes that belief system that we hear is keeping us trapped in this cycle of woe is me, or this is not going to work out. Then there's the other side where there's content and there is people who think beyond your limited belief system, and they achieve something that you feel like you can't believe, that might inspire you to do the same. And so as content creators in our own world, I wonder if we're up to the challenge of looking for these new perspectives and looking for the good in that manner, where we understand it might be difficult. It might be difficult to shift this belief system that we knew all of our lives, that we are not good at math or we're not good at X, Y, and Z. In some cases, that might be your truth. But the common denominator in looking for the good is, even if this is a truth, like for one instance, I'm going to go through this exercise with you all. Let's get into it. I'm going to put the T chart on the screen. In one case, I have had, and I'm going to give you two of my examples. I have had this thought that the world is so chaotic. I need to stay in a bubble and not deal with any humans, because humans are going to either be stressed out by me, or they're going to stress me out, or I'm going to say something wrong, or I'm not going to feel valued, or I'm going to feel alone. So these are thoughts that have come into my mind one or a few times in my life because of my interaction with human beings on the earth, right? And so my proposal was just stay away from them, and then everything will be fine. But you know what happens when you stay away from all the humans? You there's a lack of community, and although it feels good to be by yourself and to feel safe, then it might feel good and you feel safe to be by yourself. One day you might wake up and realize, oh, I think I want to be around people. I think I want a community, and that's where it starts. And so you might, from that point, be so eager to get into a community that you might just find any community, and that community might not be good for you. Or you can be slow and really be intentional about, what do I want out of community? Why do I want a community now? What is it about the previous time when I stayed away from communities, or stayed away from humans that made me upset? What was it about that time? And do I have to mimic that same experience? Or is there a possibility that I was in an environment that had a limited view and I just needed to go beyond that and see something else? What are my questions then at that point? So what I'm going to do here is I want you all to put a T chart in your journal. And I want you to think about, on the left hand side, what are some limited belief systems that you have adopted? I want you to go through that. And even in this video, I want to go back a little bit to this video. Is there's keywords and phrases that I wanted to identify for us as we go through this assignment. One is when she says she protected the belief. So that phrase, protecting the belief, is so powerful because the belief system that was protected was a belief system that was against her, right? And can work against us when we have these belief systems. When I mentioned earlier about, the political parties, is there's more of a protection of the party, even if the party is doing wrong things, because they already chose this party. Like, I gotta go hard for this party, even though there may be some things that's wrong. And on the other side, same thing, is that there might be some things that's wrong about this party, but because I need to protect it, I need to make sure that anything and everything that comes against it, I throw something back at it, or I try to defend it. Here's what's happening when we're trying to defend things that really doesn't support us, is that we keep up with this circle. We keep up with this cycle that keeps us going nowhere. When the goal, in my theory, and you all let me know in the comments what you think a good theory would be, is, again, the idea of coming to the table and realizing, what is the common fear that we both have? There might be a fear on this side of, there might be a fear that's on this side that looks in our perception like all evil and all bad, but there could be something that we were quick to listen that we might be able to connect with. Maybe not initially because of how it's presented, but most people who are doing like outrageous things, or we find like, oh, that's crazy, there is a story behind there, and we might not be interested in investigating because they already did their harm. But at one point in our lives, we have to slow down, even if it's just for ourselves. And so this is our opportunity to slow down for ourselves, to realize when we are triggered, when we are upset, what is the root of these triggers? Okay, so another key word, well, I already mentioned it, but it was the agreement that has been formed. I did a video previously about the agreements that we can make with ourselves as far as our goals and goal setting and making more money. And I wanted to go through those practice with you through the book, Think and Grow Rich. The idea of agreements comes up again in this conversation because we make agreements all the time when we use our words. And I believe in my core values and my belief system, there's a lot of strength and power in the words. It's a lot of strength in what we do with those words and how we consume it, how we receive it. And with this being my core belief system, I've noticed that when I do put power behind my words, more times than none, it's more helpful. Does it always meet the mark? Like if I say today, give me $1 million, I believe in $1 million, I might not get it. But the other parts that I've learned from just my experiences is this idea of putting the work in. So it's the work that we're doing here is, I'm not just going to think that positivity is going to work out, or thinking positive is going to help. I'm going to sit here and write with Danny the thoughts that trouble me. And then I'm going to go through a process of how do I shift those thoughts. So here, let's write down these examples again. I'm going to give you, the world is too heavy. It's the one that I had before. I should stay in my bubble. That was a belief system that I adopted. Another one is, I'm not valuable enough for people to be an intentional friend to me. Now, this was a hard one, y'all, and I'm crazy to be saying this on the internet, but there was a moment in time where this idea of friendship just started to flop. And I did not want to just be in any friendship. I was more intentional about what I wanted, and I would get what I want, and then it would flop. And then I would see this pattern of it happening over and over again. So then I went inward. I also went to therapy, which is helpful, but I went inward to wonder, why was it happening to me? But the thing about going inward is that you can get a set of questions that will have you shame yourself or make you feel worse about yourself. But the beautiful, 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 the beautiful part about one side of the chart is that there's another side of the chart. So if as I went through these questions that made it seem like it was my fault, there were other perspectives to adopt. This is one thing that I did to help me is I talked to the friends that I actually had in my life. I had questions, and I had it from a point where I still defended or believe this agreement that yeah, it's something. It has to be something wrong with me. It's something on my skin. It's something that I can't see that people are able to see that I just haven't journeyed through yet. But through conversation, I realized another perspective. Like, oh yeah, and then my question started to reform itself just because took a step to still believe my negative thought, but also consider there's something I may not know to let me walk into that. As I write down these two thoughts, for an example, the other thing I would want to take in consideration was my emotions that come up with this thought and the evidence. What were the evidence that were supporting these belief systems? So, for instance, the world is too heavy. The evidence that was supporting this belief system is when you scroll through the media, there's always something going on with politics, or there's always someone mad at another race, or there's someone who's killing another person. It's all these things that are happening where it's like the world is too heavy. And then this whole interaction of dealing with people is you can say something that you meant for good and someone misunderstands it. And so that seems heavy because it's like, how do I internally feel like I understand what I'm saying, but someone else receives it incorrectly, and it creates this war. When it comes to the thoughts about not feeling valuable, what emotions come up with that? Sadness. Okay, it's sad to feel like nobody knows who you are in your own world that you've met before. Like they don't know you anymore. You've met these people in your life, but it's like you're invisible, or no one cares, or no one even remembers you. Like I am a type of person that I will sit in my world and I'll remember people from my youth, and I'll just hope that they're doing well, even though I know I'm probably not going through their head. I really just remember like I laughed throughout my entire childhood, laughing. I've been laughing through my entire childhood. I had a great childhood, and there were people who were a part of that laughter that I thought would never, that would never be invisible. They still matter to me in that little sense of a thought. But it's like none of us had talked to one another. And so I mentioned that to say that because I thought that way, because I think like, I still care about these people. I realized like, dang, like there ain't nobody thinking about me. Like there's nobody thinking or caring. But unfortunately, that's really how it's set up. A lot of people have communicated or shared their stories about nobody caring about you. And when I think about this idea of nobody caring about you, it's still an there's still an art to it. It's like, yeah, nobody's caring about you, but does that mean that you aren't worthy of care? Does that mean that there aren't people who can care about you? Because the overarching idea is that nobody cares about you, but that's not necessarily true. There are people who care about you. And even if you truly don't believe that, what is it about your world or your environment or your experience that you want to change to choose a different script? I want a different script. I do want people to care about, and I want to care about people. What does that look like now? And you can start searching whenever I'm thinking about a project or a new tool I want to adopt or learn, and I don't know it. It really starts with searching from where you are right now. Just searching the first question of, okay, I don't know how to do that. What would be the first step? Looking for that. And that's what, we're going to explore. So now when we look at this T chart again, We're looking at the right side. So now you're looking for counterexamples of this idea of the world is too heavy. I should stay in a bubble for myself, and you would write down for yourself. For I'm not valuable enough for people to be an intentional friend to me. What does that? What does the opposite of that look like? And so the way that you get through the option. So the way that you get to the other option is this thought universally true? What other perspectives exist? Okay. So when you think about your thoughts on your left hand side and you're trying to navigate to the right hand side, it might not be as easy. So guiding questions is it universally true? And how do I know? I always wonder, how do people know? Sometimes when I'm listening to content, there are keywords that stand out to me, like, all men are this, or this is how millionaires act, or this is how whatever. Maybe from the people that we know in the images that's been shared to us, but what is the reality and how do you know? Where, even if you were to take a whole bunch of data and research reports, what was the sample that they used? How many people were in that sample? Do we know all the people in the world and all the different experiences? Because there are people who might be identified with a certain race, and because they're identified with a race, they think, oh, all people this race are this way. But you could meet someone of that race that might not be that way. And someone would say, well, that's not enough because we've seen so many people do it wrong. But what do we say to people who uh see that race do something that the world expects them not to do over and over again? What do we say to that person if their experience is always seeing this so-called group of people act in a way that's contrary to how media portrays them or how people in their belief system portray them? It can exist. The idea is, if it can exist, can it exist? Can another thought outside of the world is too heavy exist? And am I willing to try to see what that thought looks like? The next thing you can do to also help you with this exercise is to reach out to someone. I actually practiced this week. I reached out to someone about a question I had, and it was such a simple thing because I thought I was going into this investigation with the idea of, like, I'm going to prove myself, right. And I did prove myself right. In the back of my head, I knew that there was a way that I was missing, but it just wasn't coming to the front of my head. But because I decided to take that one activity into consideration, I learned, oh, not only did I learn that, yeah, there was another truth, but it was like, oh, this just took away a whole bunch of burden that I put on my head because we also thought the same thing. Again, this idea of communicating and talking to one another, we start to realize that there's truths and understandings that's shared. Even though it feels like we're in this isolated world, only believing our truth and our belief system, there's another truth to adopt that can support all of us. It's a theory. And then for us to think about breaking through this cycle, I just want to leave you with a few questions to consider if you're someone who's trying to shift your thoughts from one to the other. Is, what would I tell a friend if they shared certain thoughts about themselves that I'm sharing about myself that's negative? And try to dig into, is this belief system helping or harming me? That's one of my favorite questions, because when we think about all of the different belief systems that you can have, when we all get together in a group, this is one reason why I do like the fact that we have social media and people are speaking out loud, is at one point, people who thought that their belief system was okay, they start to get these indicators over and over again that that's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with you trying to take advantage of people. There's something wrong with you not wanting human basic rights for others. There's something wrong with that. And you're going to keep hearing it over and over again to the thing like, oh, maybe I should not be this person who is disruptive to other people, because I'm getting evidence around me that something is wrong with that people are hurt by this. And another question is, what's one small action I can take today to challenge this thought? And so we can exist in these emotions and these feelings that feel uncomfortable. And because of this, It might seem impossible to shift our thoughts to something that helps us. But the beautiful part about life is that it's full of surprises, it's full of miracles. Every day is a miracle. Me coming on this YouTube right now, being able to talk, I'm alive and I can feel like that's a miracle to me. It's really being able to write this story out for ourselves and not just adopt the story that keeps us in this drag. So there's probably something happening in the world today. From the time of this video, there's something that happened this morning that's wild, and sad. And there's probably going to be more things that are uncomfortable and happening outside of our world. And some of it we have control over, and some of it we might not have control over. But the art and the beauty in life is the creation, and how things regrow, and how even through, you know what? I was about to try to say something. I was going to try to say something that seemed like it was going to be good, but like now I don't remember. So I was going to leave the video now, and I hope that you guys take this practice into consideration. If you have any questions, if you find this helpful, please click on the like button so that I know that people have made it this far in this video. And if you're willing, go ahead and leave a comment in the comments below. But lastly, if you're interested in being intentional about your thought processes, I have been working on these books that are broken up into quarters, and I'm starting with quarter one. I'm just going to keep going on until I stop writing these journals. But they're based off of questions to really explore ourselves and the world around us. And so this first quarter is about investigating our belief systems. And the book is called Sources. It's a journal called Sources. And each sources journal is a different investigation for 90 days. And so I have started this journal together. I have almost finished it. If you're interested in seeing the final product and you would like to get more information on this journal, there's a link in the description box below so you can learn more about it. Until next time, hold on to you as much as you can. Hold on to your health, your well-being, and your mind. Be mindful. Bye.